Picture two apartments in the same city, on the same street, renting for almost the same price. The first belongs to a woman earning $88,000 a year. Open the door and you'll see a 70-inch television bolted to the wall, a leather sofa that costs $3,800, a kitchen lined with appliances still wrapped in plastic, and a second bedroom that has quietly turned into a storage unit. She checks her banking app with her stomach in a knot, because one bad month would be enough to put her in trouble. The second apartment belongs to a man earning $54,000 a year. His apartment feels almost empty by comparison. A simple couch, a modest television, a kitchen with exactly the tools he actually uses. His guest room is still a guest room. He opens his banking app the way other people check the weather. Out of habit, not fear. He carries 19 months of living expenses and savings and automatically invests almost a quarter of every paycheck he earns. Same neighborhood, same rent, and the person earning nearly 40% less has built roughly 10 times the financial security. This isn't a story about income. It's a story about a relationship between possessions and money that almost nobody is ever taught. Here's the idea that will change how you look at every purchase for the rest of your life. Everything you buy costs money twice. The first cost is the one printed on the receipt. Obvious, unavoidable, and the only one most people ever think about. The second cost is invisible, recurring, and often larger than the first. It shows up as the square footage an object occupies in your home, the time and money spent maintaining it, the mental bandwidth it quietly consumes, and the return you gave up by not putting that money somewhere else. Nobody puts a sticker on a treadmill that says, plus $600 a year to store me. Nobody mentions on the showroom floor of a boat dealership that annual upkeep typically runs about 10% of what you paid. The purchase price is simply the entry fee. The real cost is what you keep paying year after year, for as long as the item sits in your life. Let's break the second cost down piece by piece, starting with space. In most cities, a square foot of living space effectively costs somewhere between $30 and $50 a year once you account for rent or mortgage, property tax, and utilities. A stationary bike takes up roughly 18 square feet once you include the clearance space around it, meaning you're paying $500 to $900 a year in implicit rent for a piece of equipment that mostly holds a drying towel. A dining table nobody uses because everyone eats standing at the counter is quietly billing you for square footage you never touch. This is the part almost nobody calculates because the bill never physically arrives. It's baked into the rent or the mortgage payment you already write every month, invisible unless you go looking for it. Then there's maintenance, the cost of simply keeping something in working order. A boat parked in the driveway needs winterizing, cleaning, insurance, registration, and the occasional repair, whether or not it ever touches water. A backyard pool needs chemicals, a cover, a pump that eventually fails, and landscaping to keep it from looking neglected. A car with a few extra luxury features often carries service costs that quietly run double what a basic model would cost to maintain. None of these numbers show up in the moment of purchase. They show up in a slow drip, an invoice here, a subscription there, until the true annual cost of ownership becomes something people rarely calculate and would probably regret discovering. The third layer of hidden cost is harder to put a number on, but it's real: mental energy. Every object you own claims a small slice of your attention. It needs to be found, cleaned, organized, insured, worried about, and eventually gotten rid of. Researchers studying clutter have found that a visually crowded home measurably raises cortisol and makes it harder for the brain to focus on anything in particular. Then there's opportunity cost, the quiet twin of every purchase. $15,000 spent on a home gym that gets used for 6 weeks is also $15,000 that didn't go into an index fund, where it could plausibly have grown past $50,000 over the next 15 years. You didn't just buy equipment. You bought equipment instead of a chunk of your own future freedom. Add space, maintenance, mental load, and opportunity costs together, and you'll find that a large share of what people own actually costs more to keep than it costs to buy in the first place. This brings us to the first rule that financially disciplined, low-clutter households follow almost religiously. Calculate cost per use before you buy anything. Take the price, estimate honestly how many times you'll actually use the item, and divide. A $240 jacket worn twice is a $120 per wear jacket. A $400 jacket worn 200 times over the years is a $2 per wear jacket. Objectively the better purchase, even though it costs twice as much up front. This single calculation quietly kills most impulse buys. A specialty kitchen gadget used twice a year at a cost of $280 works out to $140 per use in its first year, an absurd price for whatever small task it performs. Meanwhile, a good mattress used every single night for a decade might cost less than 60 cents per use, which makes it one of the best financial decisions a person can make for something that touches their health daily. Cost per use strips away marketing and emotion and leaves you with arithmetic. It's the most honest measure of value that exists. The second rule is the replacement test, and it's uncomfortable the first time you try it. Walk through your own home and item by item ask yourself one honest question. If this disappeared tonight, would I actually go out and buy it again? Would you replace the bread machine gathering dust on the top shelf? The fondue set from 3 Christmases ago? The jeans that haven't been worn since before a move you made 2 apartments back? For most people, walking through their own home with this question in mind is genuinely eye-opening, because the honest answer is usually no. Those items aren't in your life through intention. They're there through inertia. They cost you shelf space, cleaning time, and a small tax on your attention every single day, without giving anything back. People who take this seriously don't just declutter once. They sell what has resale value, donate what someone else could use, and let go of what serves no one. It feels strange for about a week, and then it feels like relief. Rooms get bigger without anyone moving a wall. Cleaning takes half the time. You stop losing things, because everything left actually has a place. Rule 3. Never upgrade something simply because you're bored of it. This is where a lot of high earners quietly bleed money without ever noticing. The television still works perfectly, but the new model has marginally better contrast. The phone still makes calls and runs every app fine, but the next release has a slightly sharper camera. The car still starts every morning and gets you where you're going, but this year's version looks a little sleeker in the showroom. None of these are upgrades in any meaningful sense. They're wealth quietly leaving the building disguised as progress. People who build real savings hold a strict internal rule. An item stays until it genuinely fails to do its job, not until something newer exists. The average person replaces their phone every 2 to 3 years, often while the old one still works fine, a habit that can easily cost $30,000 to $50,000 over a working lifetime. Apply that same pattern to cars, furniture, and electronics, and the lifetime cost of chasing newer instead of needed can quietly climb past $200,000. Boredom is not a malfunction. The existence of a newer model is not a malfunction. Genuine failure to perform is the only thing that qualifies. Rule 4 is about engineering your environment rather than relying on willpower. Because willpower runs out, and environment doesn't. Spending should be a little bit harder than it currently is for most people, and saving should be almost automatic. That means removing stored card numbers from shopping sites, deleting apps that exist purely to sell you things, unsubscribing from promotional emails, and putting a 24-hour rule on anything that isn't a genuine necessity. On the saving side, it means setting up an automatic transfer to an investment account the moment a paycheck lands, before that money ever shows up as a spendable number in a checking account. People who build wealth quietly don't trust themselves to make the right call every single time they're tired, stressed, or emotionally worn down. And they're right not to. Instead, they design a system where the disciplined choice requires no discipline at all, because it's simply how the system is built. Something as small as a 24-hour waiting period on non-essential purchases tends to dissolve a striking share of impulse buys entirely, because most of that initial desire for an object quietly fades if you're not allowed to act on it immediately. Rule 5 sounds almost silly until you actually try it. Count what you own. Pick one category, shirts, shoes, kitchen gadgets, whatever it may be, and simply count. Most people guess low, sometimes by a factor of 3 or 4, because accumulation happens slowly enough to stay invisible day to day. Once you know you own 41 shirts, buying a 42nd one feels different. You're no longer getting a new shirt. You're consciously expanding a pile you already know is too large. This is why people serious about their finances often set hard caps for categories that tend to creep. Maybe 30 pieces of clothing, maybe 15 books on the shelf at once, maybe a strict one-in, one-out rule for anything new that comes through the door. Left alone, possessions expand to fill whatever space is available to them, the same way a gas expands to fill a container. A simple limit forces every new addition to be a conscious trade rather than an unconscious accumulation. Rule 6. Rent or borrow before you buy. Most purchases follow a predictable emotional arc: intense enthusiasm for a few weeks, then a slow fade into indifference, then years of quietly taking up space. People who avoid this trap test an interest before they commit real money to it. Curious about camping? Rent gear for the first 2 or 3 trips before buying anything. Thinking about woodworking? Borrow tools or use a shared makerspace before filling a garage with equipment. Considering a kayak? Rent one 4 or 5 times across a season first. This approach does 2 useful things at once. It quietly reveals whether the enthusiasm is real or just a passing mood, which is much cheaper to discover while renting than after buying. And if the interest does turn out to be genuine, renting first usually means you buy exactly the right equipment instead of guessing, which beginners almost always do, ending up with either too much gear or the wrong gear entirely. Garages across the country are full of quiet monuments to hobbies that lasted a single season. Ski equipment worn twice, camera bodies that never left their boxes, instruments from a band that played 2 shows and disbanded. Rule 7 is about something called the lifestyle multiplier effect, and once you see it, you can't unsee it in your own spending. Almost no major purchase stands alone. It drags a whole ecosystem of smaller purchases behind it. A boat needs a trailer, a vehicle strong enough to tow it, a storage slip, safety gear, and appropriate clothing. A home gym needs proper flooring, mirrors, storage, and sometimes electrical or ventilation work to make the room usable. A motorcycle needs riding gear, a place to store it safely, and often a truck or trailer just to move it around. People who understand this run the full ecosystem cost before saying yes to a major purchase, because a $5,000 item can easily become an $8,000 or $12,000 commitment once every supporting piece is added up. The effect also runs in reverse, which is the encouraging part. Selling one major possession often eliminates an entire cluster of recurring costs at once. Get rid of the boat and the storage fee, the insurance, the registration, and the towing costs all disappear together, not just the value of the boat itself. Rule 8 might be the most important one on this list. Define enough before your income grows, not after. This is the trap that catches high earners more than almost anyone else. Income rises, so lifestyle rises to match it. The new lifestyle becomes the new normal, so it takes another raise just to feel like progress is being made. And the cycle repeats indefinitely, with no finish line in sight. It's a well-documented pattern that someone earning $300,000 a year can feel just as financially squeezed as someone earning $80,000, simply because their spending expanded right alongside their income. People who avoid this trap decide in advance what enough actually looks like. What size home is genuinely sufficient, what car meets every real need, what level of comfort represents true satisfaction. And then they earn toward that fixed target instead of a moving one. Someone who decides that $60,000 a year is genuinely enough and later starts earning $150,000 sends the entire $90,000 gap straight into savings and investments. Someone earning the exact same $150,000 but continually redefining enough upward might end up saving almost nothing at all. Rule 9 reframes the entire idea of what wealth actually is. Measure it by optionality, not by accumulation. Most people measure wealth by what they can show: the house, the car, the visible signals of having made it. A more useful measure is what you can actually choose. Could you leave a job that's quietly damaging your health? Could you take 6 months off to care for a family member without panicking about money? Could you say no to a well-paid opportunity because it conflicts with something you value more? These choices are only available to people who've built real margin between what they earn and what they spend. Someone earning $200,000 a year but spending $195,000 of it has almost no real freedom. They're locked to that income the same way someone earning far less might be. Someone earning $80,000 and spending $45,000 has extraordinary freedom by comparison because they can absorb a shock, take a calculated risk, or simply choose differently. Every purchase, seen through this lens, isn't just an exchange of money for an object. It's a trade of future freedom for present possession. Sometimes that trade is worth making. Often, on close inspection, it isn't. Rule 10 is about consistency over intensity, cyclical decluttering instead of one big annual purge. Most people who attempt a decluttering project do it once, feel great for a few weeks, and then slowly drift right back to where they started without ever noticing the drift happening. Within roughly 2 years, the closet looks exactly like it did before the purge began. People who actually keep the weight off do it in small, regular passes instead. A quick glance at what came into the house this week: one category evaluated each month, an overall check of accumulation trends once a quarter. Removing 3 items a week is genuinely sustainable. Removing 300 items once a year feels overwhelming, and overwhelming tasks get postponed indefinitely. This regular rhythm also builds a kind of pattern recognition over time. You start to notice which categories tend to balloon, which emotional states tend to trigger a purchase, and which marketing tactics reliably work on you personally. That awareness is what allows someone to prevent accumulation instead of constantly cleaning up after it. Here's how to put all of this into practice starting this week. Walk through your home with the replacement test in mind and find 10 items you genuinely would not buy again if they vanished tonight. Sell what has resale value, donate what someone else could actually use, and let go of the rest without ceremony. Notice honestly how it feels to remove something you never really wanted in the first place. Most people expect guilt, and instead find something closer to relief. Then for the rest of this month, apply the 24-hour rule to every non-essential purchase that crosses your mind. Keep a simple running note of how many of those desires survive the full day versus how many quietly disappear once the urgency of the moment passes. That single piece of data tends to be more revealing than any budget spreadsheet because it shows exactly how much of your spending is impulse dressed up as necessity. Over the following quarter, count your possessions in the 3 categories that accumulate the fastest for almost everyone: clothing, kitchen items, and anything in the entertainment or media category. Set a maximum for each one based on what you've genuinely used over the past year, not on what you might theoretically need someday. At the same time, sit down and actually write out what enough looks like across the categories that matter most. What home is sufficient? What car meets every real need? What level of wardrobe genuinely covers your life? Writing it down matters more than it seems like it should, because a standard that only exists in your head is remarkably easy to quietly abandon the first time temptation shows up. A standard written on paper that you can go back and reread is much harder to talk yourself out of in the moment. Here's what almost nobody tells you about the relationship between owning less and having more. It runs in both directions at once. Owning less creates more money, but having more money also makes owning less feel completely natural, almost automatic. When savings are genuinely healthy and investments are quietly compounding in the background, the urge to accumulate things tends to fade on its own, without any real effort. A lot of consumption is really an attempt to fill an emotional gap that financial insecurity creates in the first place. And once that underlying insecurity is addressed through actual financial strength, the compulsion to buy things often loosens its grip without a fight. This creates a genuine, virtuous cycle. Spending less allows for more saving. More saving builds real security. Security quietly reduces the emotional pull toward spending, and reduced spending then accelerates the next round of saving even further. Each turn of that cycle reinforces the one after it, almost effortlessly once it gets started. The opposite cycle is just as powerful, and it runs in the exact wrong direction. Spending everything creates insecurity. Insecurity drives more spending because spending offers a quick, temporary hit of emotional relief. That additional spending deepens the underlying insecurity even further, and the whole pattern continues, often for years until some external shock, a job loss, a medical bill, an unexpected repair, finally forces a reckoning. This is why the choice between these two cycles tends to shape someone's financial trajectory far more than their income level ever does. A high earner caught in the destructive cycle can end up building almost nothing over an entire career, while a modest earner riding the virtuous cycle can quietly build real, lasting wealth on a fraction of the income. Research on well-being consistently shows that once basic comfort and security are covered, additional spending contributes surprisingly little to actual life satisfaction. Yet most people continue spending as though happiness scaled in a straight line with the size of a paycheck. Go back for a moment to those two apartments from the very beginning. The one with 19 months of savings and a calm, unhurried relationship with money didn't get there through an exceptional salary. It got there through exceptional clarity about what actually mattered enough to keep, and what was simply taking up space out of habit. The other apartment, the 70-inch television, the boxes still unopened, the two paychecks between comfort and crisis, belongs to someone who never stopped to question the quiet assumption that more possessions add up to a better life. Both of those outcomes are available to you starting today, regardless of what your paycheck currently says. The only real question is whether you want to own what you have, or whether, without quite noticing when it happened, your possessions have started owning you. The math is not close. Neither, it turns out, is the peace of mind.